So then you were the one who taped his mouth shut. Were you also the one who carried him in the house with his mouth taped shut and threw him down the stairs? I see some minimization. You said that this was mob mentality and they couldn't help themselves. Again, it sounds like you're minimizing. So I'm just wondering if you could explain what your role was.
And in a moment, we will hear what his role was in this horrific crime at this Minnesota parole hearing. He is 27 years into a life sentence for the unspeakable acts that he did to this man. And when I say unspeakable, well, they're going to describe it to you in a moment. I'll unpack it with all the details at the end.
Our records indicate that on January 31st of 1998, Moises, Vidal, Kinney, and his co-defendants were seen dragging the victim, Joshua James Christensen, into the kitchen of a house. Joshua had masking tape around his head. Kinney and his co-defendants assaulted Joshua Christensen by punching him, kicking him, and jumping on his back. Joshua then fell down the basement stairs and became unconscious. Joshua was then dragged from the house to a car. During the assault, he was also stabbed and had a foreign object inserted in his anus. On January 31st of 1998, St. Paul police located a vehicle with the victim, Joshua Christensen, lying in the back of the car. Paramedics pronounced the victim dead. An autopsy was performed on February 1st of 1998 and reported that the cause of death was exsanguination due to multiple sharp force injuries. The victim had stab wounds to his neck, chest, and abdomen. The victim suffered additional and severe blunt force traumatic injuries and sharp force injuries about the head, face, neck, trunk, and extremities, as well as tears to his insides. On February 19th of 1999, Moises Vidal Kinney was sentenced to a minimum of 30 years by Ramsey County District Court after having been found guilty of first-degree murder. Kinney was also found guilty of 2 counts of murder, second degree, and kidnapping, but did not receive a separate sentence for each of those counts. Today's review represents his initial review after serving approximately 27 years of incarceration. His parole eligibility date is May 26th of 2028. Thank you. I turn this matter over to the board. Commissioner?
Good morning, Mr. Kinney. How are you today? Can you unmute on your side? Okay, there we go.
Yeah, I'm nervous,
Okay.
but I'm okay. I'm just willing to be an open book today.
Okay, excellent. I'd like to start off by asking if you could just tell the board what it is you'd like to see happen as a result of today's meeting and why.
Yeah, I'd like to begin by I want to be able to start out by apologizing to Mr. Christensen's family and loved ones for taking Mr. Christensen from them, for all the pain and trauma that I had caused them, for robbing them of the life experiences with him, the moments, the talks, the sadness and the loss. I would also like to apologize to them to say sorry to them for not apologizing to them at my sentencing. I have regret for a lot of things and remorse for a lot of things back during that time. But not apologizing to them is right at the top of that list. And I've regretted it ever since because I wanted to. Um, I'm sorry for not apologizing to you. I also want to apologize for what I put Mr. Christensen through that night. He did not deserve my actions. He deserved to still be here today. Um, yeah, I'd also like to take this opportunity. I know this hearing is live, and this crime that I committed was affected a lot of people, and I think it would take a long time to name everybody that I know it affected. So I just want to apologize to everybody that it affected and changed their lives, and that it still affects to this day. Um, I apologize to everybody. Um, I'm deeply sorry. Um, I would also like to share with you who I was at the time of my offense. For a few years after my offense, I had only seen that I was drunk and that I got out of control. But I had sought help and immersed myself into everything possible to find out how I could get to a point to treat somebody the way I did and to take somebody's life. And I was able to find out that a lot of things in my life had had began when I was much younger, and I was able to connect the dots to my life, like beginning as a child. And as I go through these things and talk about them, and in no way am I using these things as an excuse, because there is no excuse for the way I acted. It's just an explanation to how I got there. Um, as a child, I um, I witnessed a lot of I witnessed a lot of violence towards my family. Um, as a young child, um, and even when I things got a little bit old, when I became even around 11 or 12 years old, I started witnessing violence in my home, even towards my mother. I started witnessing severe domestic assaults. When I tried to even help my mother out, they turned towards me. In the neighborhoods I lived in, I seen a lot of violence. I began I, I began to see the light. I began to see life as feeling very unsafe, and I responded in such because I wanted to feel safe, and I would often see when I seen other people that were looked up to as being tough. I told myself at the early age of like 12 years old that that's how I wanted to be perceived, and I did things for other people to see me like that. I also began to worry about how people perceived me. I never wanted to be perceived as somebody that somebody could pick on or be perceived as like a punk or being soft. And I lived like this for a long time. Um, and then when I began to drink at around 17 years old, these all those thoughts I had were always heightened when I drank. And I had a lot of problems when I began drinking. I would have blackouts. I would I would pick fights with people. Um, I didn't think about people's rights. Uh, and I always would go do things above and beyond to try to prove myself. And I had issues with my drinking. And I continued to live like that until January 31st, 1998. The night of this crime I commit. That night, I chose to drink after being sober for 3 months because of my issues with alcohol. I chose to drink when I shouldn't have. I chose to go to a party that I shouldn't have been at. I chose to sodomize Mr. Christensen with a broom handle. I assaulted him and I murdered him. I'm deeply sorry for how I treated him. I still can't believe how I acted that night. As I reflect on my actions that night, how I continue to reflect on my actions that night, I can think I I've been able to always think of how I could prevented everything. If I wouldn't have drank, that wouldn't have happened. That night, as I began to worry about how other people thought about me, I could have left. When I started the fight that night, I could have stopped it. When things started to progress even more, I could have if I couldn't have stopped it, I could have got him help. I regret all of my actions and my inactions. And I know I can't change them. And I'm deeply sorry. Um, when I got to prison after I was convicted, I went to prison with some vague goals to try to do something different with my life because I had a lot of guilt and shame for my actions. As soon as I got to prison, um, a lot of that changed for me because of all the violence I had seen around me. I immediately got pulled into to the criminal culture, and for me it was a lot of out of safety and not even being able to see the light of day at that time. I wasn't caring about the prison rules. I was only caring about the rules of the culture at that, just to fit in. It wasn't until about 2006, we had a guest speaker in Stillwater, a lady by the name of Mary Johnson, uh, and she had a young man that actually lived right down the tier from me named O'Shea Israel. As she spoke, she was speaking about the day she found out her son was murdered, and then she talked about the days and the months and the years that it had ensued about her sadness and the pain and the trauma that she went through. And the whole time she spoke, I was thinking about Mr. Christensen's family and loved ones and what they had been going through, and 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 it really had made me emotional hearing this. And then she got to the point where she started talking about some of the healing she was going through, and then she had reached over and she started speaking about the healing she was going through with Mr. O'Shea Israel, and I didn't know that he was the one that had killed her son. And O'Shea began to speak about the healing he was going through with his family. At this point, I was locked up almost 8 years, and I didn't know anything at this time about how to do any type of healing. I had thought, man, going into prison, I just had to deal with my time and my consequences. And this was a turning point for me on how to do something with my remorse. Um, I decided I was going to do something different with my time. I still didn't know how to I didn't change my life completely at this time, but it was a turning point for me. Uh, but about 2 years later, um, something pivotal happened for me, and it was the hardest time of my life, but it was the best time as I look back. Um, a whole bunch of things that happened. I did go to segregation, but my kids were going through a horrible process. So were my siblings. But I had also came to the conclusion that criminal lifestyle that I was involved in, like I just couldn't stand being around it anymore. Like it seemed so pointless to me. It was irritating to me. Um, that pain of staying the same and like it, I just couldn't do it anymore. Um, I decided I was going to do something different with my life, and I completely made that change. Um, and it wasn't just that. I had seen like all the pain that I caused so many people, and it wasn't just the pain of my past. It was the pain I was still seeing people going through at that time in like 2000, late 2007, early 2008, what they were still going through at that time. And and it completely changed me. Like I immersed myself into every program that Stillwater had to offer. Um, every program, every group, every class, and what it did for me was like it taught me how to start reflecting in a healthy way instead of dragging me down, and it it gave me it taught like in my past I thought I had friends, but it really taught me how to build relationships. It taught me how to start mending and healing with people. It it taught me how people were challenging me and calling me on my BS. We it taught me how to start building in my community and how to give back. Um, it built a foundation for me for life. I my education was like ended up being a powerful part of me because I learned how to start processing information, not just in education, but for life. Um, it it truly changed who I was. I only got in trouble one time after that, and it was I think in 2013, and I got LOP. I have not been in trouble since. Um, and and it's I've been able to really do a lot of things with my life since then in a positive way. Um, and the last thing I really want to share with you is that is the reason I know today, man, how I know I will never affect nobody in a in a negative way ever again is because it, because like my heart and my soul will never allow it. My character is different than it was 27 years ago. Um, I do not allow myself to be in those types of situations that I was in 27 years ago. I put myself around the right people, um, the right situations, the right circumstances now that are pro social, and and I'm just not that person anymore. It's like night and day. Um, yeah,
Can I ask a couple of questions just in
yeah,
follow up?
yes, please.
So, and I really appreciate you walking us through that history and some of the change and the points of inflection points along that journey. Um, and I just want to, I think, ask just a series of questions um, that as I imagine myself, if I were Christensen family, and I might be these would be questions I would be asking myself. And some of them I don't know what the answers would be, or if there even is good answers. But there was a point in time when this offense was happening, where this was not like an instant thing, right? It wasn't about a fight that broke out and boom, there was something that happened. It went on over a period of time. And in fact, Mr. Christensen died probably alone in his car, right? He was, by all indication, um, not necessarily, had not necessarily passed away prior to that. Um, and so there's this question. If I was in their shoes, I would be asking, you know, and I understand you're intoxicated and all those things, but I think as you pointed out in one of your letters, and which I appreciated, you said, look, that's not an excuse. A lot of people have problems with alcohol and don't kill somebody, right? And a lot of people have a lot of trauma. And again, those are all things that are real. I don't want to diminish any of those, and you didn't either. Um, but the question is, how do you go from torturing someone over the course of hours to the change of who you are today? And you just described a sense of your character, your soul, your being is fundamentally different. How does that happen?
Uh, so how do I go from that person that night to
Yeah,
who I am
yeah,
today?
yeah.
Honestly, because knowing what I caused and the amount of pain that I caused so many people is like like it tears me up inside. It that's what that's really what changed me the most. I knowing in my past I worried so much about trying to protect myself, in this like defensive survival mode that I lived in, that it was so hard for me to see other people. That's so far gone. But for so long now, like when in my reflection and being able to see everybody else, that's what's changed me is reflecting and seeing the pain of everybody else and how I affected their lives. Not just then, but how it continues to affect their lives continually.
Mhm.
And and uh, and with Mr. Christensen's family and loved ones and friends and his community, like I don't know what they go through personally. I gotta assume what they go through. Like with all the programming I do, we do a lot of insight, and so I'm always assuming what they go through, and that's difficult to know. It's very difficult on my heart to know, and that's changed who I am, and it's got me to a point where I know I can never hurt nobody again. I don't even want to hurt nobody with my words.
Let me, a couple of questions come out of that.
Yeah.
You talked about the fact that, you use the gift of imagination to try to understand what the impact of your stuff might be on people in real terms. Is that right?
Well, not just that. I've lost people too, and I've lost people in my family to murder. So I do have the empathy,
Okay.
like, and I and not only that, I've put myself in their shoes. Like it's been, it's very. I've mentally and emotionally put myself in Joshua's shoes, Mr. Christensen's. I put myself in the mother's shoes, the father's, his siblings. I did it with my own children. I did it with everybody. And imagine what each one of them has went through all the way through this whole process since that night.
Let me ask you this, would if, and again, I'm just throwing this out there into the universe. If the opportunity ever existed for you to meet with um, members of the Christensen family to both hear and discuss and talk about what happened and the implications and that kind of stuff,
Yeah,
is that something you'd be interested or willing to do?
I would definitely do it. Um, I've actually thought about that for many years with me being involved in RJ all these years. I've I've always wondered if that would be a possibility. You know, every week sitting in RJ 101, we see these victim offender dialogues, and so every time we're watching these on these films, or we went to get guest speakers when we've seen them, I've always wondered because we've seen good ones, we've seen bad ones, and I've always wondered if I would have that opportunity, but I also I know like there's not always like a like if I was to get it, I would just want to give them whatever they would need for their healing or answers because I know forgiveness isn't always the answer out of a victim offender dialogue. Sometimes it's just answers.
Right.
But I would want to give them whatever they would need.
I appreciate that, and I don't know what willingness there would be. Can you talk about the last time, just in terms of, you talked about, 2013 was your last discipline or loss of privileges, which, is not necessarily discipline, but, um, there's this, some might have, and again, going back to my own sense of like thinking about what I might think about if I were in the shoes or the position of a family. How would we know um, if Moises Kinney were to be released and encounter somebody who was less than hospitable, rude, cut you off in traffic, whatever it was that you don't lose it and use violence and use that sense of not wanting to be a punk, as you put it earlier, or that the things that the strategy you used to manage your life at the time was to be bigger, badder, tougher than anybody else. So how do we know that that wouldn't be what you would do? And I guess just to tie that to your life today, can you think of a time in the recent past where you've had to manage a situation where even on the inside there was a situation, a person, a circumstance where it was harder to maybe swallow that? Because I think this is life, right? Life happens to all of us, and how do you manage situations that where those types of frustrations occur?
Yeah, I actually had a situation like this just a few weeks ago. Um, but I actually being in prison, these situations actually happen quite often.
Yeah.
But um, but I made a decision a long time ago. I don't know. I would say I made two decisions a long time ago. Um, One was I no longer cared what other people thought about me. The other one was violence was no longer an option under no circumstance, and I've stood on that. So, but the situation that happened a few weeks ago, I was actually talking to somebody else that I was trying to talk him down from he was trying to redial on the phone because we got a rule in the unit. And while I was talking to him, somebody else came up that didn't know what was going on. And this guy, it was a newer guy, decided to kind of use me as the guinea pig and kind of do some indirect threats at me. And when I tried to explain it to him, it just he got escalated. When I see things get escalated, and I know I can no longer talk to the person, I remove myself immediately. I always try to communicate with people first, but violence is no longer an option for me. And I'm not just saying that because it sounds good. That is how I have been living my life. And so I moved myself immediately. And and I will continue to live my life like that because it's not worth getting in trouble. I do not want to live with the consequences of it, whether it's to get in trouble, to hurt somebody, me getting hurt, or any of the type of consequences that come with it. So and I've done that many a times, and I don't care what people think about me. You know, some guys I've lost friendships over it, but I don't care because that's who I am. And you know, some guys in prison look at it like I'm being soft. I don't care. That's who I am.
So what can you talk a little bit about, the things that you are doing, the things that you are involved with, um, where you are not just doing well yourself, but where you're trying to help other people along the way. Can you talk about some of those things and what you've learned through, like, with peer mentor stuff or whatever it may be?
Yeah, that's actually where I've kind of like found my purpose. Um, when I yeah, for me, like I do a lot of like co-facilitating and mentoring, and sometimes it's through peer recovery work. I get called upon to do that when guys are struggling, whether it's with addiction, or trying to get away from the criminal lifestyle. Um, just like this last weekend, there's a guy that he was really wanting to use because of some struggles with his father, and I got called to go sit down with him for a couple hours. Um, and because I got to sit down with him and kind of de-escalate and calm him down, you know, he didn't go use. Um, I really find like I find gratification in being able to do that. It plus it also keeps me on my path, being able to sit down with guys and do that. Um, it and also too, like when I sit down and spend time with guys, like it reminds me of the people that were there for me when I was trying to change my life. Like so like yeah, like I feel grateful and not and there's even much more to it at that point because uh, I think I said something about it earlier, and if I didn't, I meant to. When I began doing this type of work, I began to do it because when I was like trying to heal and mend things with a lot of people, there were so many people that I was not able to heal and mend things with. So I was facilitating and mentoring, that was my way to pay it forward with the people that I couldn't. It just became even more. It became personable. It became a part of my foundation. Became part of who I was. And I built a lot of good friendships and relationships along the way. And and yeah.
So talk a little bit about, you've done many things in the course of your time, and that's obvious in terms of record and the different things that we see here. Um, Talk about like you have this 30 years of mandatory minimum, but if you could write your ticket, what would it look like? What's the pathway look like in your view, and what thoughts have you given um to wanting to move forward and whatever that looks like?
Um, yeah, yeah, I've, I've actually kind of been speaking to some of the staff here about that for a while now. I, w- I, w- I would like to begin my process. Um, I'm trying to earn my way back to the community, beginning with the 18-month transfer to Red Wing. And the reason I'm asking for Red Wing is because I've been working at my electrical career for almost 7 years now, and I'm about close to 500 hours away from taking my master's license exam, and that's the only facility that I'd be able to take it at. Um, Plus, recently I had acquired my special boilers license, and I could take my second class license at Red Wing too. Plus, Red Wing is also the only facility where I could keep my continuing education credits active for my electrical journeyman's license, my special boilers license, and my peer recovery license. Um, and and also, I've been speaking with a guy named Alan from the Redemption Project, and they don't offer that here at Moose Lake. But he told me if I get to a facility that offers that, I know that Red Wing also offers that. He told me he could get me connected with a couple of their mentors. They would work with me there and post uh, uh, work release. So that's what I would be asking for.
Okay. Um, I'm gonna turn the floor here to Mr. Sanchez, and we thank you for being here today and support of Mr. Kinney. Uh, we'll I would open the floor to you just to talk a little bit about your experiences with Mr. Kinney and what you've seen in him, and then we'll open the floor so that the board can ask questions of you, Mr. Kinney, or Mr. Sanchez, and go from there. But that again, I want to say thank you for being here today, and just I would open the floor to you to provide whatever information or insights you have.
Thank you, Mr. Snell. Thank you for having me here this morning and to the rest of the staff there. For a little info, I started at Stillwater in 1992 as a CO1. I retired in 2014 as a CO2. And in that time, I conducted many classes just as our paths kind of crossed that way. I did a lot of classes with staff. I actually did classes for some of I have to get used to the term IPs. Back then it was offenders. So excuse me if I fall back to that.
It's all right.
But I did a class with the IPs called Building Character Traits. And that class really introduced me a lot into the insights and thoughts of the IPs, especially. I was on the security squad for a number of years, and I always really put myself out there, standing in the rotunda every day, talking to the guys on a personal level. And so I really got to learn those guys. And I knew him, I got to know him as I did with a lot of other offenders. And I learned what his journey was going to be about. And every day we would talk, almost every day we would talk. And I kind of grew up in the neighborhood like he did. So I knew the thought process. I've had close family and friends sometimes were incarcerated. So I knew the thought. And watching him grow, and I've heard a lot of lines, heard a lot of thoughts from some of the guys that I would talk to. And I would just kind of listen and say, okay, but you got to stay on the journey. Mr. Kinney always did. He'd have a setback once in a great while, but it wasn't anything really big, but he always stayed on the journey. He was always trying to find class and trying to be a peacemaker within the walls of that institution. And as time went by, I saw him grow and grow and grow. And I kind of took an interest in him, and we would talk more and more about his classes and what he should do. And actually, I learned from him as well. Working behind the walls can really jade a person. I'm sure you know about that, Mr. Snow. And I returned in 2014. We kept in contact via the IP phone system and still bouncing questions off each other. Saw him grow and saw him grow. And talked about the crime, if I may. There's no crime out there that's not heinous or not bad. There's no doubt about that. But when we talked about the sodomizing of that, I said, "Do you realize where you're at that time?" I said, "Hurt people hurt people. You did what you could, in essence, to basically humiliate that person because you were feeling the humiliation at that time from the other guys in the group. Is it right? Of course not. Two wrongs don't make it right. But at the same time, I can understand where he's at. Certainly no justification." And I think it kind of hit home for him as to what he had really done, how he felt the humiliation himself, how he felt the hurt himself. And I'm hoping that brings him a little bit of peace because he still struggles with it today. Um, if I may say, having worked behind the walls myself, you know, I fought a lot to keep my sense of humanity and compassion as well. And along with that, you know, you have anger issues, trust issues. Some people have PTSD and whatnot. So it's hard to go home from that job and not let all this stuff happen to you. Well, I still have trust issues, trust me. And I said, but this I know. I really trust that Mr. Kinney will go on in the name of God, in the name of Josh, to continue to prosper and getting better and endeavor for not only for himself, for the betterment of himself, but for the people around him. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, and thank you so much for the work you did here and that you continue to do in support of Mr. Kinney. And I really I appreciate your honesty about just what you see in him and just the nature of this work. And so I appreciate that. With that, I would just open this to the floor to members of the board with any questions for Mr. Kinney or Mr. Sanchez.
Mr. Kinney, I have more of a comment than a question. First of all, I think you've done a great job of wrestling with your demons and trying to help other people. You made the comment, you made two decisions a while ago. And one was, I no longer care what people think of me. And that startles me just a little. I think I know what you meant, but I think there is a point where we do need to care what other people think. So it's just a comment. You don't, that's all.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah, please.
Uh, I when I said that, I meant I don't care about what people in that criminal lifestyle think about me, because I do care what my children think about me, my bosses, my my peers, and that are around me, that are living, that I'm being, that we feed off each other, that we care about each other, care about what Mr. Sanchez thinks about me, my caseworker, the people that my pastor, my friends, my support system. I never want to let those people down. You know, I care about what they think about me. I don't. That's what I meant.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. That's what I thought, but I thought it was worth some clarification.
Yeah.
Just related to this, can you talk a little bit about, you talked about at the time of the crime, this was about kind of maintaining your status or ensuring your status as uh, not being the punk, not, being the guy that people should be afraid of. And that when you came in, that some of that orientation remained, and for a host of reasons. It's not always an easy environment either. But when you started to, what did you notice when you put out? And this is going to be oversimplification. When you put out good stuff to other people about you and about the way you were living, what did you see change in the way you were being treated?
Can you clarify that? I'm kind of,
So just that sense of how did what you put out into the world change the way you were treated by people?
you talking about back
No,
back
now
then?
as change started to happen,
Oh
as
yeah.
you became more positive, what happened? What did that look like?
Oh yeah, yeah. That was powerful. Because I was scared. I was actually scared. Um, like when I decided to put a different view of who I was out, like I really thought that, like I had really perceived like that I had like enemies and people were gonna attack me when I changed. I was, excuse my language, but like I was nervous and scared, and when people seen that I was serious, those people that I was nervous about, like they came up and like they were congratulating me and they supported it, but they just needed to see that it was true, that it was consistent. And 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 then there was other people that they I didn't know that they wanted to do the same thing, and it gave them courage to do something else with their life.
Yeah.
And I didn't
And I
know that neither. And I didn't know that neither.
Yeah. And I suspect what happened there is exactly the reason you have Mr. Sanchez sitting by your side here today. Is that what you put out comes back to you in support and in relationships and in positive stuff. So I appreciate that. Other questions?
I do have a question as well, and also an observation, very similar to what Commissioner Chanel just said. Um, some of the most striking letters of support within the packet were actually from some of the sergeants and people who work in the jail. That I think that speaks volumes, because as a former corrections officer, like I know how that is, and I know like you have a pretty good BS meter. It's a requirement of the job. So for officers to put that information out there, I think that does speak well. My question for you. So you put together a really, really robust packet and a lot of description about the past and um, everything that led up to it. What the piece of it that stood out to me, and when you were the section is titled "Dealing with My Crime and Its Ripple Effect." Okay, and you talk about the following day, the day immediately after the offense when you woke up. And when I originally read it, I really wasn't sure how to take it. And I'll give you some explanation for it, because in it, you said when you woke up, you found out someone had called you, said that Mr. Christensen died. You couldn't believe what had happened. You got emotional. And you talk about how you immediately had a deep sense of remorse for what he went through. You immediately thought about his family. So I actually wasn't sure how to take that, and if that was just lip service, or if it's something that you've I know through the restorative justice and all the stuff you've done, I have no doubt that is something that has kind of been developed. But is there a different level maybe of kind of what that understanding or what that reaction was in the moment versus now that you've had 27 years to kind of work through that? Is there a difference between the two? I mean, does my question make sense to you?
No, it makes a lot of sense because I remember that day, and I remember that morning, and I also because that morning because it was actually the following day because when I woke up that day, it was actually the next day when I got the phone call, and I don't know why because when during that day, it's not like I wasn't blind to what had happened the night before, but I was kind of I was kind of like it was I didn't know for sure if he was dead, and and I think there was that part of me hoping that he wasn't, and but then when I got that phone call and knowing for sure that he was dead, um, I do remember I was sitting in my room myself, it, and I went through a lot more emotions than what I had put there, and I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does. Like I said, I was struck by like that in that morning, the brevity of the situation um, that you would describe remembering, thinking like the impact that it had had on the family. And so I was just wondering, like, I certainly understand that as part of your growth process,
Yeah.
you know, going through restorative justice and some of those other programs, that would certainly come. And like, and maybe
Oh,
that's what I'm asking. Like,
I
is there a
get it.
greater depth of the
Yeah,
understanding?
yeah, I get it. Yeah, no, oh, there's definitely a greater understanding. I think that's why I put something in there along the line about I thought I understood the depth of it then
Okay.
compared. I, I I think that's what I put in there because I thought I understood like the loss and the pain, but as I like every week I sit in our RJ 101 now and we have these talks and with the other participants or we're watching these films and the more realization I come up with, like I realize how much deeper it is. Or as you know, with Mr. Christensen's family, like what more they could be going through. Or guys are in the room talking about, you know, a murder that happened in their family, you know, 35 years ago and how their family is still struggling. Or, you know, even conversations I have with my children, how they're still struggling to this day. And then I gotta put everybody into, you know, what they're still struggling with. You know, this just didn't happen 27 years ago. People are still struggling. And I get it. I don't, yeah.
All right. Nope. Appreciate that. You have answered my question.
All right.
Mr. Kinney, when I hear you talk about your crime and the before and after mindset that you had, you seem to blame alcohol and being intoxicated for what happened and what you did to Josh. And yet, when I read your comprehensive risk assessment that was done fairly recently, it sounds like you were thinking about beating him up even before you and this woman went out to get food to bring back. You said you looked around the room and he was the only one who wasn't part of a gang and you decided you were going to pick a fight with him. So then you were the one who taped his mouth shut. Were you also the one who carried him in the house with his mouth taped shut and threw him down the stairs? I see some minimization you said that this was mob mentality and they couldn't help themselves. Again, it sounds like you're minimizing. So I'm just wondering if you could explain what your role was from the time you got back with that food. You started a fight in the back in the snow with Josh, and it escalated. People inside came out. You admitted that you got the tape from inside the truck or car and taped his mouth. And what was your role thereafter?
Yeah, I mean, the- this whole crime is my fault.
Yeah.
From the beginning until the end. Um, yeah, and so I started the fight with Mr. Christensen, and when I had mentioned the mom mentality, here let me start back with your question. When me and him were fighting, and the other guys had jumped in, when I said the mom mentality, I had said that because it felt like we were feeding off each other. Like like I was trying to one up them what they were doing. And like if they were kicking, I began kicking. And that's what I had meant. And
But you were the one who taped his mouth shut. Went in the truck or car and got the tape and taped his mouth shut.
yeah, I don't remember where the tape had came from, but yeah, I had grabbed the tape.
Did you carry him inside also with his mouth taped shut and all
Yeah,
bruised from?
yeah,
Did you do that? Did you
yeah,
do that? Did you, not we, did you do that?
I did.
You carried him inside.
Yeah,
And did you throw him down the steps?
no, I didn't throw him down the steps.
I also am concerned, Mr. Kinney, because it sounds like you had several enlightening events and yet your conduct continued. You said that Mary Johnson in 2006 spoke at Stillwater and that really impacted you. And I understood that. You said seeing her son's murder was a turning point for you. Do you remember using those words?
Well, I said hearing her talk about it and
Was a
thinking about
turning
her
point.
and hearing her talk about it, it made me think about what Mr. Christensen's family I went through and the healing. I knew then being a part of like the RJ and the healing was where I needed to be.
My point
Yeah.
is your infractions within the institution continued thereafter.
Yeah, I had one more or two
Was
more.
there
Yeah.
also one in 2023?
No.
No, it must have been a typo because it was 2013 was your last infraction.
Yeah.
And that was when you were found with medication on you that
Yeah.
was, okay.
2013.
Thank you, Mr. Kinney.
That was the one I had loss of privileges for.
Thank you.
And can I respond too about about the uh the alcohol too? When I had spoke to Mary Spaniel about the alcohol, I actually didn't even want to bring that up during my risk assessment, um, because I didn't want to blame alcohol for the night of my crime, and she was the one that had brought it up, and because when I was in treatment, anytime I had brought up alcohol for my crime, I would always get grilled because it sounded like I was trying to minimize my crime. And after a while I understood where I began to get it because I chose to drink knowing I had issues. So I knew I couldn't control myself. So that was my fault. That and And when Mary Spaniel had asked me about the alcohol, I did tell her I didn't bring that up when she was asking about the contributing factors about my crime. And she was just like, well, that was a contributing factor. I said, yeah, it was, but I didn't want to blame it on the alcohol. And then I told her, I said, but I do know that if I wasn't drinking, that the rest of the crime probably wouldn't have happened.
I see that it's inconsistent with the fact that you brought up in this hearing just a short while ago, when asked about the crime and your role in it, that you had fallen off the wagon, that you'd been sober for 3 months, again, blaming the alcohol that was
Yeah.
the responsible. So I don't hear that you were trying to stay away from blaming alcohol. I heard that you tried to do that today. I don't have any further questions.
All right.
Anything else from members of the board? Hearing none. Mr. Kinney, before the board begins deliberation and discussion about next steps, I want to briefly open the floor to you for any final comment. So I would just open that up to you.
Yeah, I would just like to again apologize to Mr. Christensen's family again. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I put you through. I'm sorry for what I put Mr. Christensen through. I want to apologize to everybody else that I affected. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank everybody that's this stood by me and encouraged me and challenged me through this journey. I would also like to ask my support system that's down there to raise their hand, so that way the board knows who my support system is. And I would just like to thank the board for this opportunity today. And that's it.
Thank you. And at this time, I'm going to close the discussion. During board discussion and deliberation, the board will not entertain questions or allow interruptions. And with that, I would open this to the board for discussion about what we heard and next steps.
Point of clarification. My understanding is he's not even eligible for parole for another 3 years. Is that correct?
That's correct.
May of 2028?
Right. So really today is really more about like, what does it look like between now and then?
Or do we continue it beyond that?
Or be continue beyond then? Yep. I just want to say that I'm struck by just that it's, as we've talked about, it's hard to wrap your head around the gratuitous nature of the violence that happened at that time, and one-upsmanship, the fact that there was a point at which I think Mr. Kinney himself described Josh being in the house and crying, and obviously probably I can only assume afraid and all of those types of things. And yet, it continued without regard for the obvious vulnerability that he was facing at that time. And then at the same time, I'm struck by the fact that Mr. Kinney acknowledges responsibility for the fact that, but for him, that at any given time, either by virtue of his choices or his actions, that he could have shifted the direction that this entire thing happened. And I am appreciative of the fact that he sees and acknowledges that, that today. There is, at some level, little doubt that he has done a lot by comparison to the many, and has been, has been a leader within in the facility, and is regarded as low risk. But while I certainly don't want to be in a position to ever speak for the people who are left behind by virtue of his crime, I'm left with that sense that at least Mr. Kinney feels that either obligation or willingness to give the victims an opportunity to speak to whatever it is they would need to speak to. And I'm appreciative of that. I don't even know if that's viable or possible, but I'm intrigued by that.
My reaction was a little bit like Andrew's when I read all the support letters from staff, and I thought staff are really good at detecting bullshit, and they had a lot of praise. And so that was a big deal to me. I have a concern about what's going to happen when he gets out into the real world, where people are pissy and mean, and he feels like a drink, and that would be my concern. And so, having said that, I mean, I think we have no option. We deny parole, but I'd like to see us move him toward getting out. And I guess for me, that would be step down now, because I think he'll do fine in prison. I want to see what he does when he's out. So I'll just make a motion, deny parole, and review in, I guess, 3 years, but maybe have DOC consider a step down process to minimum at least.
Is there, so there is a motion. Is there a second? I'll second it for purposes of discussion, at least to have, to be able to talk about how, what the thoughts are of other people, and how if this is on track or not. So there's a motion and a second, discussion related to that.
Well, so for discussion purposes, I'm actually in support of step down model. Exactly what that looks like, I guess, is the point of the discussion. My only, I guess probably the reason I didn't second it is just the uncertainty as to, I mean, is it 3 years before we see him again, or maybe we do, I mean, do we do a paper review again in a period of time? Because my assumption is if it's just a straight 3 years, there's no really opportunity for us to review for the possibility of work release or any of those sorts of things, and kind of that true progressive nature. So I throw that out for discussion purposes. And maybe if others are in agreement or whatever, maybe there's an opportunity for some amendment. But that's just kind of my thought. But I don't, I think he's done a lot of good stuff. He is deemed low risk based upon the assessment. Certainly, Member Ramstead raised some concerns about some of the perceived the perceived use of kind of alcohol as a scapegoat. I didn't quite get the same, but I certainly understand where she's coming from, because I too heard it. But I am in support of moving in the direction, certainly.
So let me add a layer onto that, because I agree, because I'm thinking about here um, the whole notion of how do we make sure that uh, that as we think about the impacts of this, that should they wish to, that we make sure that the victims have a place at the table, so to speak, to provide some level of input, which might be then better if he was seen in 24 months or 28 months or something like that, where at least then victims can come back in and have an opportunity for input should they wish to do that. And frankly, just based on what Mr. Kinney has talked about, I'd like to at least maybe even reach out to them if we can, and just to see what interest they may have in trying to explore some level of discussion during the course of the next 24, 28, 36 months, whatever this ends up being. And so I think that those would be some of the things that I would look at. Um, and I know that we have some things to talk about relative to placement. I know he wants to go to Red Wing. It seems like everybody we've been talking to wants to go to Red Wing, wants to go to Red Wing. And as I understand, but there's X number of beds there and those sorts of things. Plus, I'm just mindful of the fact that that Mr. Kinney has been locked up for 27 years. Really, the vast majority of his adult life has been in prison, in custody, and based on that, he has perhaps not had as many chances to transition. And so I think to what I appreciate about the motion is that you would like to see some level of step down progression, and let the team work on where and how that can happen, and certainly weigh the interests of Mr. Kinney in that process, and where those interests can be best met, because I think in the end we want him to be in a place where that can aid his success into the future. So I don't know, Member Brave, how you feel about some of this conversation. And
Yeah, I'm not married to the when he comes back.
Okay.
I'm more married to the idea that he starts progressive. And I have to say, I thought much like you did, Cheryl, that blaming thing with alcohol, so I get what you're saying. One comment I would make is while he's done a lot of checking the boxes, I'm not sure I hear that it's really affected his mental framework or his thought processes with respect to the crime or the use of alcohol. And I like your idea of being able to get further input as to how, if there is a meeting, that would go and what the input would be. Because I think the victim, given what the victim went through, we need to continue to take the family input, or at least offer them the opportunity. So I would like to see a 2-year continuance, and at that point, have him come back for a review. And at that point, we would urge or we would encourage, do whatever it takes to make it happen, that he meet with the victim's family if they are agreeable, and that we get that input.
I think that would be fabulous. I think along the way, um, just having met, many of us have, but having met Mary Johnson, and prior to her passing, it just really powerful, and I can see where that would be influential and just what that can mean. Not by way of forgiveness, but as I think, as Mr. Kinney pointed out, just at least to give people who are left behind the opportunity to get whatever they need from that process. So, Chris, you're comfortable
I'm
with that
comfortable
and
with that.
modification. So really, it's just to restate kind of where we are would be to deny parole, not grant a date today, obviously. Continue for 24 months and direct that the facility follow kind of the direction of moving Mr. Kinney in a way forward that tests transition and change as we go forward. And certainly to include Mr. Kinney in that. And then we would also ask that our victim services and restorative justice folks explore what may be possible around a victim offender dialogue, should that be something that they would be interested in, to allow for that input as you described. Am I missing anything that, and beyond that, just the obvious of remaining discipline free and, continue positive programming and so forth, and working on release plan, but
Point of
So, yeah.
clarification.
yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
mean
that's
to
right.
interrupt you. To test the transition, could it be a transfer to a similar facility as opposed to minimum? I mean, could we leave that up to the people at the institution
Absolutely.
to
It could
decide whether it's to a
another medium.
yeah, because that would test the transitional, nature of his adjustment as well.
Mhm. Yeah, and so I think though the range of possibilities that the team could look at are there, and in both in terms of that testing the transition and his ability to manage transition, but what programs and services he may need that could be beneficial going forward.
Well, do you have a real problem with moving to minimum if there's a place open? I mean, that's more what I would like to see. I think he could move to medium again and do fine. I'm more interested in, as he progresses out, what's that gonna look like? I feel like it should be left to the institution and their perspective as to programming and what would be most appropriate for him. I don't feel like we're in a position at this point. We usually do say
Well,
we'd
but he
like to
hasn't-
see him go. He hasn't served his minimum. Those cases in which we've done so have typically
Right.
been cases where the minimum's been met.
Or we've done some step down, like in this
Yeah.
phase where they would start to do transition in this process. I mean, the benefit, and I would just say that, and the program review team at the facility would be the one to, I think, work with him. It sounds like, in looking at a lot of this, they're talking about the fact that certainly they see the direction he wants to go, and I don't think it does, as I read through, didn't seem as though they had major concerns. But I think recognizing the role and voice of the board here, but I think we can certainly look at that. I do think that the benefit of testing in a minimum environment is at least he is still at one of the facilities and can be brought back in should there become any kinds of concerns on the part of staff. But I think the program review team could look at that and really develop that transitional plan for us to
Well,
consider.
and I'll just say they did. I mean, they did look at it, I
Yeah.
thought, and they gave two options, and one was to begin the move to minimum, and if the board doesn't want to do that, then keep them in
Moose Lake.
medium and keep them at Moose Lake. So,
Well,
So
just for clarification, Cheryl, you're not necessarily opposed to it if the prison facility people, if they're in alignment, like you're not necessarily opposed to it, but you're not you're not necessarily saying, no, this has to happen. It's a little more discretionary on the part of the prison folks.
That's right.
Am I understanding
That's
that
right.
right? Okay,
That's
fair
right,
enough.
Andrew.
Fair
That's
enough.
exactly my position. Well, can I do this then? The motion was to begin to move him to step down. And so if I'll just clarify, and then if there isn't a second, you could do a different motion. Mine would be deny parole and begin to move him toward minimum, continue for 24 months, and he interacts possibly with the victims, maybe not, but we hear from them again and he comes back. So that would be, I just would like that to be my motion.
And I would support that just based on what I see in some of the in the PRT notes here. I would support that as a second. And so we do have a motion and a second relative to that general direction. Now, obviously, anything that would change would certainly be subject to review internally by staff as well as by by us if there was some type of really fundamental shift or change in his progress. So we do have a motion and a second. So with that, I'm going to call for a vote to the motion. Board Member Bray,
Yes.
Board Member Larson,
Yes.
Board Member Ramstead,
No.
and Schnell votes yes. The motion prevails. So, Mr. Kinney, you've had a chance to hear the range of deliberation and the discussion. By a 3-1 vote, you will be making a recommendation to the program review team to initiate some conversations with you and looking at where programming embeds maybe a space may be available to kind of meet your interests and needs as we go forward. I would encourage you to continue the work that you're doing and take what you heard today and make the most of that and go from there. And we will talk with our restorative justice folks about what may be possible relative to victim engagement. Any questions about that?
No, I thank you, and I did hear your concerns, and I'll work on those.
Thank you. Good luck to you. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Okay, so they're going to see him again in 24 months, and they're going to leave it up to the DOC to transfer him to another prison or to transfer him to a lower security prison. I think they're leaving that up to the DOC, and they'll see him in 24 months with the possibility of then getting granted parole. It's kind of an interesting process, and I'm surprised by Minnesota. I do think that they do a lot of things right. It's really interesting that they have this parole hearing process where they discuss whether someone will get, it's not even like parole wasn't really even an option for them. It was an option, but they weren't considering it seriously. It was more of even should he go from maximum security to medium security or medium to low security, and you get this process where you eventually you can even go to work release and then you can get paroled. It's interesting. I think it's pretty thorough. Again, Minnesota, this is all new for Minnesota. They did not have a parole board like we are accustomed to. It was only one man, the man who's sitting, I forget his name, in the center, who's leading the show, the chairman. And then only recently, about a year ago, did the governor and the chairman say, "Hey, let's make an official parole board." So it's not just these decisions. And I thought, I can't, again, I'm not familiar with the names, but the one who denied, I thought she hit it on the target. We'll go over the information. Lady Holly has so much information on this case. We'll go over the appeal. And then there's also something interesting I want to share with you, which is we covered this man's co-defendant. Now he has like 6 co-defendants, but 4 of them got kind of light sentences. The other one got a life sentence, and this co-defendant, who came in also with the life sentence, he was like, I didn't do anything. I didn't do it. I did nothing. I just did this, or I didn't stab him. I was just there. I was, and
But there's accounts in there that was said that I did, that I actually didn't do. But, that's always been a hard question for me because I never wanted to take away anything that looks like I'm not taking accountability for my actions or being responsible for anything I've done. I've, I know what's on paper. I know it says that I was in the backyard and I brought him in taped up, and that just simply wasn't the case. I wasn't the one that did it. I had I was inside when they did bring him in. I did start, punching on him and kicking on him. But the initial part of it wasn't me, wasn't my doing. I wasn't the one that brought him in taped up. And I know, I've gotten this question several times, and it's always hard for me because, it's, I don't ever want to see like I'm not taking responsibility or accountability for my actions. I can only be responsible for every action that I did that night, and I'm responsible for that, and I take full accountability for that. It's been 27 years at this point. I wouldn't, deny anything or say I didn't do something when when it's not the truth. I've done the time.
that it was an interesting hearing, and I'll leave a link to. I haven't recorded it yet, but I watched it, and I was trying to think, how should I do it? Should I do them back to back? But that was also like an hour and a half hearing. Then would be a 3 hour stream, and I'll just leave a link to it in the description if you want to see that hearing. And it's interesting to see the comparison. But this guy definitely was the ringleader, and it was interesting. I thought how when I first listened to the hearing, I listened to it without reading Holly's notes. I just listened to it. And I thought, wow, this guy, he seems like he is taking accountability. Like, he didn't beat around the bush like his co defendant. He said, I did this, I did this, I did this, and I did this. And I actually thought it was like a good hearing in that sense. But the parole board member, the woman, the one who objected to the step down process, she did call him out. And it was interesting because she said, you said if I hadn't been drunk, it wouldn't have happened. That sound you just heard from my phone, by the way, it's been doing that for a few months, and I have no idea what app is making that sound. No idea. It's really frustrating. I've checked for running apps. It sounds like a sports app, but it's just this noise that my phone makes now. Anyways, and it was interesting because now he did check himself into a substance abuse program. He checked out and then immediately committed this crime. But it's like, if you were going to blame this type of action on alcohol, then you are probably like, you should never get out because you're just one drink away from doing something barbaric, But I get it from his perspective, thinking, well, if I wasn't drunk, I wouldn't have done it. But again, it's like not taking accountability. You can't see that. And there's something very evil that one just can't get around. This wasn't a regular killing, but he went there and he used, when you think about just how horrific the crime was, I just can't get over that. Like, this wasn't just a murder. This was torture. This was sadistic insanity. And it's like, you didn't get the insight as to why he did it. You didn't actually get like the Miss Bonnie Jackson type of digging where it was like, well, why did you do it? Like, where's that rage in you? I mean, did they talked about his background, but like, still to use to break the handle off a mop? Why? Here it is again. I have no idea what it is. And I even have my phone on Do Not Disturb. Driving me nuts. So look at all the research that Lady Holly did. It's incredible. I mean, it's a little overwhelming. 9 pages. And she brings down all the resources, all the links. Like, she works so hard on this. And as I don't know if any of you know, she does not get paid. This is purely volunteer to help share these stories. So let's go through the facts of the case. Let's go through the appeal if you want the facts of the case. Decided July 13, 2000. So it was following a jury trial, right? That he was convicted of 1 count of murder in the 1st degree. Good thing I checked. I was not. 2 counts second. So let's go through the facts. The relevant facts from the record can be summarized as follows. In January 1998, Christensen was enrolled in an inpatient chemical dependence treatment program at Regional Hospital. On January 30th, 1998, Christensen left the hospital on weekend pass. He met a friend, Alex Tovar, and the two went to a bar where they ran into Lionel, Becerra, and Kinney. Who is the code? Let me look at my notes. So the co-defendant that we have is Kinney, I think. No, I'm confusing myself. Christensen left the hospital weekend pass. He met with friend Alex Tovar, and the two went to a bar. They ran into Lionel, Becerra, and Kinney. Kinney invited Christensen to Tovar to a birthday party for Daniel Thompson being held in St. Paul. Let me just double check who the code there is. So Alex, I just double checked. Alex Tovar is the co-defendant whose parole hearing we also had. So, and the two went to a bar and they ran into Lionel, Becerra, and Kinney. Kinney invited Christensen and Tovar to a birthday party for Daniel Thompson, being held in St. Paul at the home where Michael Cleveland lived with his mother. Christensen, Tovar, Kinney, and Becerra attended the party along with Thompson, Cleveland, Robert, Medina, Luis, LeBron, Octavia Jones, and others. At some point during the party, Kinney and Christensen got into a disagreement that developed into a fight in Cleveland's backyard. During the fight, Kinney, along with others, wrapped masking tape around Christensen's head, covered his eyes, nose, and mouth. Christensen was then carried into the house and leaned against the dining room wall where he slid to the floor as if unconscious. The tape was removed from Christensen's mouth, allowing him to breathe, and he eventually started crying. At which point, big strong man Kinney here, along with others, resumed the beating by hitting, kicking, stomping, and jumping on him. At some point, Christensen tumbled down the basement stairs where the beating continued and where Kinney did this to him with a mop handle. Eventually, Christensen was carried outside and put in the backseat of a car where he was stabbed by Tovar a number of times with a barbecue fork. And here's the interesting thing. Alex Chico Tovar, whose parole hearing we cover, his co-defendant, he insists that he did not do this. Which is quite interesting. He says, it's in my jacket. They say I did it, but I did not do it. And he goes on to say, I know I shouldn't say I didn't do it, but I really didn't. Evidently not satisfied with the damage being done by the barbecue fork, Tovar went into the house to retrieve a large kitchen knife and stabbed Christensen. Kinney then took the knife, stabbed Christensen, and said to Tovar, I want to let you know that I'm with you. I'm with you on this. With his body still in the back seat, Christensen's car was abandoned on the corner of Kent and Jessamine Street in St. Paul, where it was found the next day. Kinney was arrested for Christensen's murder in May 1998 and almost immediately attempted to negotiate a plea agreement with the state. Those negotiations began on May 28 and culminated on June 1st with a plea agreement contingent on Kinney not having stabbed or essayed Christensen. Kinney's attorney assured the state's attorney that Kinney had not stabbed Christensen. Shortly after the agreement was reached, Kinney informed his attorney that he both. So they make an agreement, and then he tells his attorney, I did both. I essayed him and I stabbed him. That same day, without informing the state about what he had learned, Kinney's attorney allowed Kinney to give the police a statement. As part of the statement, Kinney told police he had essayed, assaulted, and stabbed Christensen. This is really strange. It's like he made a plea agreement, and then the attorney encouraged him to make a statement to the police. It makes no sense. So I guess that's part of his appeal. Like, why would his attorney do that? Based on that information, the state withdrew the offer of the plea agreement. So he gets the plea agreement, tells his attorney something. The attorney encourages his client to speak to the police. That's just weird stuff, right? I mean, with an attorney like that. Kinney claimed detrimental reliance moved the district court for enforcement of the plea agreement. After an extensive hearing, the district court, by order date November 12, 1998, denied the motion based on mutual mistake of the state's attorney and Kinney's counsel. At the time of the agreement was being negotiated regarding the extent of Kinney's involvement in Christensen's death, the district court also concluded that Kinney had not detrimentally relied on the plea agreement. In conclusion, 3 of the November 12, 1998 order conclusive of the law, district court referring to Kinney's June 1, 1998 statement indicated at best the information obtained during the interview may be used to impeach the defendant should he testify at trial inconsistently with June 1st, 1998 statement. Defendant does not have the right to offer perjured testimony. Thus, there is no detriment being prohibited from doing so. Frankly, I do not. I'm not digesting what I just read there. The parties and the court revisited Kinney's June 1st, 1998 statement during jury selection on February 10th, 1999. The discussion arose in the context of the defense effort to get to the state to enter into stipulation informing the jury that Kinney had given a statement to the police, but that the statement contents were inadmissible. Part of the discussion took place off the record. On the record, Kinney's counsel summarized the off the record. What is the moral of the story here? I don't know the moral of the story here. I don't know. My head's not fully in it to try to figure it out right now. It was, on the face of it, it was like a simple case. But the second I found out in the spreadsheet that he had a co-defendant, I didn't listen to the co-defendant's hearing, and things become more complex because now my brain is thinking about both hearings. Here's the code of how many co-defendants there were. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And you can see, so Jesus Malave had 17 convictions. He only got 36 months for kidnapping, though, even though he had 17 prior convictions. Cristobal Malave got 31 months on kidnapping, while he had 36 charges. Majority of them are traffic parking. So Lady Holly goes through all of this work, and then each of these links is a breakdown of each co-defendant. I mean, it's just insane what she does. Lionel Balsera, charged with accomplice after the fact, got 48 months. And he has crimes since then, which Lady Holly drops in here. Luis Lebron, sentenced 3/23/1999 to, I don't know what that is. Robert Medina. This dude only has one charge for this event. He got assault third degree and got 21 months and 5 years probation. And this is the prince here that will cover his previous parole hearing. Back to the day, the dot over the letter I is called a title. Title? Is that how it's spelled? Title? Now you know the proper term for that tiny dot. Is that no? That's tittle, right? The dot on the letter I is called a tittle. It's so random. There's our fact of the day. So yeah, I mean it's you know, let me know in the comment section if you would have preferred that I match up both hearings. But I will cover that hearing. I'll try not to publish this one until that one is done, so that I can link them in the description if you want to see them. But I'm impressed overall with how Minnesota handles these hearings. I think ultimately it will depend on when they're going to come back in 2 years. I forgot to bring this up. It was interesting how they're talking about the family and the victim and why this part I don't get. You know, in some hearings we see the victim speak, and in others we don't, and I don't understand why there's that inconsistency and why you wouldn't allow a victim to speak at these parole hearings anyways, and how they're talking about, well, it's important, of course it's important to have the victim speak. I mean, this man was brutally tortured. His death was just a thing of hell, of nightmares, by these monsters. Really, the more you think about how brutal it was, and just like really for no reason. Messed up, man. And with that, I'll let you go.
So then you were the one who taped his mouth shut. Were you also the one who carried him in the house with his mouth taped shut and threw him down the stairs? I see some minimization. You said that this was mob mentality and they couldn't help themselves. Again, it sounds like you're minimizing. So I'm just wondering if you could explain what your role was